Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. I am using my Prismacolor pencils today to color a W+9 stamp. I'm using a 110-pound cardstock. This is not Nina, it is Joann's actually. I wanted to see how this image would color on this cardstock with colored pencils. It's not quite as smooth as a Nina cardstock. The stamp set I'm using is a W+9 stamp set. It's called Kind Soul. W+9, the company itself, is no longer in operation, but Dawn, the illustrator, is now illustrating stamps for other companies, and I'm grateful for that because I love her illustrations. This is one of the ones in my stash, and I will keep it forever because I think it is beautiful. I'm going to stamp it in Versaclear Nocturne Black ink. I will leave the stamp in my Misty Stamp Positioner, and after I have colored it with the colored pencils, I will go back and stamp over it because there will be some wax residue on the black lines that I want to remove or overstamp when I'm done. I want to apologize for my voice. I just cannot kick this congestion in my sinuses and in my chest. And it is, oh my gosh, it's the bane of my existence right now. So hopefully I don't have to stop the video 1,000 times to cough or to take a drink of water or something. But now that we've talked about the coloring and my congestion, let's go ahead and talk about our crime. So our alphabetical journey today takes us to the state of Louisiana. Now, as we talked about last time, Louisiana was admitted to the United States as the 18th state on April 30th, 1812. It was part of the Louisiana Purchase made by Thomas Jefferson, and the boundaries of Louisiana currently are pretty much the same as they were then. Louisiana is the only state to have parishes instead of counties, and was named after King Louis XIV of France. Mardi Gras in New Orleans is a world-famous event, and it has been celebrated for hundreds of years, and it is considered a time of celebration before the beginning of Lent. The Louisiana Native Guard was the first in America to swear in African-American officers, and they did so in 1862. Louisiana is home to the world's largest bridge over a body of water known as Lake, I'm going to butcher this, Pontchartrain Causeway. The bridge is roughly 24 miles long. Louisiana State Capitol building, located in Baton Rouge, is the tallest in the United States at 450 feet high. The patent for Tabasco sauce was one of the first patents ever in the state of Louisiana, and it was filed in 1870. The first opera ever performed in the United States took place in the French Quarter of New Orleans in 1796. Got my dates wrong there. The state drink, I know you're not going to even guess this. It's not alcohol. It's not soda pop. It's milk. And Louisiana is the home place to a little boy who was kidnapped twice. To understand how one boy could be kidnapped twice, we need to meet a few people. First, we're going to meet Julia Anderson. Now, Julia Anderson was born on May 1st, 1844 in South Carolina. Her parents are George Washington and Beatty Anderson. She was fourth of their 13 children, and eventually she migrated to North Carolina and married a man named Elisha Ford. Their marriage record is recorded as March 10th of 1904, and census records have them living in Columbus, North Carolina. Now, Julia has 3 children listed as being born to her. A child born in 1904 who died the same day they were born. I believe it was a son. And then a second son born in 1907 who she named Charles Bruce, and a daughter named Dell Bernice in 1911. And one record indicated that all 3 children were born while she was married to Elisha Ford. However, However, the same record lists a second marriage in 1914 to James Rawls, and then 2 other marriages with no dates. One is to a James Cowan, and the 4th to a man named Dr. Brown Walters. Doctor is his name, not his profession. Scuttlebutt around the town at the time was that only the first child, the one who passed away at birth, was Elisha's. Bruce and Bernice were actually more notably, or more, apparently they were doctors' children. Even though he's listed in the record I found as her 4th spouse or companion, apparently Bruce and Bernice were his children. Now, whatever, right? Whatever. The newspaper listed the divorce between Elisha and Julia in 1908. So that kind of works out. If they were divorced, those 2 children born after that probably were not his. So Julia had a reputation, here's my air quotes that you can't see, of being that kind of woman. Whatever, right? It was the late 1800s, early 1900s, and moral values were what they were. But more importantly than moral values, people were judgy, and they did not allow for, don't get me wrong, I have my own set of moral values, but I think that not being judgy should be just as important as your moral compass, right? So Julia was considered, again, air quotes here, that kind of woman. And she was not a woman of means. She wasn't destitute or homeless poor, but she was poor. And one of her jobs was a caretaker for an older couple. Okay. So the next person we should meet is a man named William Cantwell Walters. William was born in January of 1862 in North Carolina. I don't have a date. His parents are James and Elise Walters. He was 6th of their 11 children and the older brother to Dr. Walters. Again, doctor is his name, not his job. And Doctor was Julia Anderson's baby daddy, for lack of a better word. Because, again, I can't find a marriage date for Doctor and Julia. William did, in 1885, marry Mary Alice Birch, and they had 4 children. William worked as kind of a traveling handyman. He did not, or his reputation was kind of one of being less than fixed. He was transient, I guess. But he specialized in tuning and repairing of pianos and organs. So that tells me that he had a specific skill set, and the traveling was more out of need than wanderlust. Back in the day, not everybody had a piano in town, right? He had to travel to do that job. Now, the older couple that Julia Anderson reportedly worked as a caretaker for were William and Doctor's parents, James and Elise. So here we've got this tie-in. Julia is in a relationship with Doctor, whose brother is William. Okay. Julia also is a caretaker for their parents. The last 2 people we need to meet are a married couple named Leslie and Percy Dunbar. Now, given again the time, I'm assuming that these 2 were married, but I can't find a marriage date. Okay. They were parents to 2 children. Robert Clarence, a.k.a. Bobby, was their oldest son. He was born in 1908, and John Alonzo was born in 1910. And the Dunbar family lived in Opelousas, Louisiana. So, now that we've met all of our important people in the story, it's time to get to the actual story. The story of the boy who was kidnapped twice. So, in August of 1912, Percy Dunbar and his wife Leslie took their boys on a fishing trip to Swayze Lake in Landry Parish, Louisiana. This is a lake that was near their home, but not, in their hometown. On the 23rd of August, on that trip, Bobby wandered away. Now he's 4-year-old Bobby wandered away from the family tent and disappeared. Just disappeared. No trace. No immediate trace of where he had gone. A search party tracked Bobby down to the lake, and authorities decided that he had probably fallen into the water and drowned. Logical conclusion. However, a couple of days later, Bobby's hat was discovered a bit away from the lake, like some distance from the lake, and people decided that, or started thinking that maybe he had been kidnapped, not wandered off. So an intensive search was then undertaken, and there was no success, like they were unsuccessful in recovering Bobby's body from the lake. So Percy Dunbar, the father, and the Opelousas County officials concluded that he had in fact been kidnapped, and a reward of $6,000 was offered for information about this missing child. Now that would be over $150,000 today, closer to $200,000 today. So they're searching, they don't find his body, they've determined he's kidnapped, they have announced this reward, and I found nothing else about this case for 8 months. So fast forward 8 months, and for some reason, authorities have tracked down a man named William Walters. Now, William had been traveling through Mississippi. Again, William is a traveling piano and organ repair and tuner man, right? He'd been traveling through Mississippi with a boy who appeared to match the description of Bobby Dunbar. So William claimed that the boy that was with him was a little boy named Charles Bruce Anderson, aka Bruce, and that Bruce was the son of a woman who worked for his family, and that this boy's mother, Julia Anderson, had willingly placed Bruce into William's care for a trip to visit some of William's family members. Keep in mind that William would be Bruce's uncle if Bruce is in fact Dr. Walters' child, as was rumored and not disputed in anything that I saw by Julia. So William has a very logical explanation as to why this 4-year-old child, or probably nearly 5-year-old child now, is in his care, and police don't care. He is arrested, and while Julia was notified of William's arrest, and I'm assuming that she was notified by William, not by the police, because the police called the Dunbars in Louisiana, or sent word to the Dunbars in Louisiana to come to Mississippi because they had found their child. So come identify this boy and take him home. Okay, so here is my first question in this case. If this child was identified as the son of Julia by William, who was his uncle, who was in legal possession of the child, why was William arrested? Why was he stopped by police in the first place? And why were the Dunbars called when there didn't seem to really be a question about the identity of this child? Now, I didn't find anything that suggested William had a criminal past or that Julia was questionable as a child's mother, except for the judgy people and her unmarried mother status. I don't understand. Now, yeah, I don't get it. That was my first question. I was like, why was William even stopped the first place? Why was he arrested? There's a logical explanation to why he is in the company of this child. Anyway, Percy and Leslie traveled to Mississippi to see if this air quote here, quote, found child was their missing Bobby. And there were a number of different newspaper reports about this reunion, and they were very conflicting. One report stated that the child did not recognize either parent or their younger son, John Alfonso. Another report said that he ran toward Leslie, calling her mama. And another report said that Leslie wasn't even sure if it was her son. So here is my second question with this story. Bobby went missing when he was 4. How much could he have changed in 8 months? Infants and babies, they change a lot in 8 months. But preschoolers, like 4-year-olds, they don't change that drastically. And there was nothing I read that reported that this child in question had had his hair dyed or shaved or had any other thing that would vastly change his appearance. So why was Leslie not sure if this was her child? I don't know. I'm a mama. I don't know. The next day, after having taken the child with them to presumably their hotel, Leslie reported that after she had had the opportunity to spend some time with him and bathe him, she was able to positively identify his moles and scars and was certain this was her son, Bobby. Not Bruce, Bobby. So after she's looked at all of his moles and scars, she's convinced this is her son, Bobby. So the boy, Bobby, returned to Opelousas with the Dunbars, and they were greeted upon their return with a parade and a brass band and celebrations for his homecoming. Yay! He's been found! So after William was arrested, Julia Anderson arrived in Mississippi. And she was there to support William's story that the boy was in fact her son Bruce. She told authorities that she had allowed William, who was again her son's uncle, to take him for what was supposed to be a 2-day trip. It seems like this 2-day trip was much, much, much longer than 2 days. But it was supposed to be originally a 2-day trip to visit some of William's relatives in Mississippi. So they had left North Carolina, supposed to visit these relatives and then come back. But there's some other issues with this, okay? So first of all, according to newspaper reports at the time, the police brought in 5 children who were the same age and size as the boy that they, quote, rescued from William, and showed them to her one at a time. And she did not recognize any of them as her son. Also, when the boy that was then claimed as Bobby was shown to Julia, and she asked the police, is this the child that the police recovered in William's custody? They did not answer her. And of the 5 boys, she could not say which one was her son. So same question here as before. This child is 4 or 5 years old. He cannot have changed so much that you would not recognize him as your son. But also, there was no report that this boy who had been, quote, rescued from William's custody ran up to Julia and said, "Mama, Mama, Mama." This child did not pick his mama. Okay. My next question is, when she asked, is this the boy that you took from William? Why didn't the police ask her? Why didn't they not answer her? I don't know. So she was also given the option to visually examine the boy, to look at all of his scars and moles and all that stuff, right? she, at that point, indicated that the child that the police had, again, I'm using air quotes here, rescued from William was her son. But because upon the first identification, she had been uncertain, and again, going back to her air quote, her moral character is what they called it, because her questionable moral character, she was deemed untrustworthy. Now, I get that they have problems, their moral values are what they are, and they have problems with her having children out of wedlock. But in my research, she never lied about who her kid's father was. So why does that make her automatically less trustworthy than another woman who could not positively identify the child as her son? I get it. Right? Moral values were different then than they are now. And again, I have my own set of moral values, and I think probably we should go a little bit more backwards than forward in some areas. But I don't think her sexual history should have been a factor in determining whether or not she was honest or trustworthy. One has nothing to do with the other, I don't think. And I, again, didn't see anything about where she lied about the paternity of her children. So I don't know why that was a factor in this. But with no money to sustain a long court battle, Julia just returned home to North Carolina. And then she went to Louisiana for William's kidnapping trial. So she was a witness to his innocence. She testified that she had given her child to William for a trip. And yes, she said it was supposed to be just a couple days. And yes, it was longer than a couple of days. But he did have permission to have her son. And she really pushed the judge to admit that the child that William had in his custody was hers. While she was in Mississippi, helping prepare for William's Louisiana kidnapping trial, she became acquainted with the residents of a town, Poplarville. That is apparently where William had been. And according to the residents of Poplarville, William and the boy in his custody, the boy he claimed who was Bruce, had been there quite a long time, and they were well known to members in the community. And some of the people in that town have memories of William and Bruce, that boy, being there prior to the disappearance of Bobby Dunbar. So despite that, and despite Julia's testimony, the authorities in Mississippi determined that the boy in William's custody was not Bruce, it was Bobby. And so William was extradited from Mississippi to Louisiana for trial. He was convicted of kidnapping and sent to jail. And the boy remained in the custody of the Dunbar family and lived out the remainder of his days as Bobby Dunbar. But this is a story of a boy who was kidnapped twice. So let's delve in here, okay? After the trial, the people in Poplarville welcomed Julia into their fold. And she moved there from North Carolina, and she created a whole new life for herself. She remarried, and according to one source, had 7 more children. Now, I could not find a record of that marriage. It could have been one of the other 2 men that I have record of her being married to, but I don't know. According to her descendants, she became a devout Christian. She helped found a church. She served as a nurse and a midwife in the small community. And her children indicated her life was happy after she got to Poplarville, but that she often spoke of her lost son and the family that had kidnapped him, the Dunbars. Julia died on February 1st in 1940, and she is buried in Poplarville, Mississippi. In 2008, one of Julia's sons, a man named Hollis, had a visit from Bobby Dunbar at his place of business, and they talked for some time. Hollis's sister Jules had a similar experience where a man who she believes to have been Bobby Dunbar came into this service station where she worked and talked to her for an extended period of time. On the flip side, the Dunbar family, Bobby Dunbar's son Gerald told a similar story. Gerald said the family was returning home from a trip and passed through Poplarville when Bobby said, quote, "Those are the people they came to pick me up from," indicating the Anderson family. And then the Anderson family and Bobby had a brief visit. Now, William served 2 years of his prison term for kidnapping, and his attorney was successful in appealing the conviction, and it was overturned by the Louisiana Supreme Court. He was granted the right to a new trial, but the Opelousas parish prosecutors declined to try him again. They said that the first trial was very expensive and they just didn't want to go through that again. So he was released from custody and he resumed his kind of traveling piano, organ repair, or tuner lifestyle. I don't have any record of what happened to his family, except that on the 7th of April of 1945, he died and he was buried in Colorado next to his wife. So at some point in time, he and his family moved to Colorado and he put down roots. Now, the boy who was raised as Bobby Dunbar got married and had 4 of his own children, and he died in 1966, and he was buried in Opelousas, Louisiana. His wife, his widow, died in 1994 and was buried next to her husband. So here's where it gets interesting, or more interesting. Years after Bobby Dunbar's death, one of his granddaughters, a woman named Margaret Dunbar Cutright, began her own investigation into the events of the kidnapping of Bobby Dunbar. She went through newspaper accounts. She interviewed the children of Julia Anderson. She examined the notes and the evidence presented by William's defense attorney at his kidnapping trial. Her original intent was to prove that Bobby Dunbar was in fact Bobby Dunbar, to put it all to rest. But her research led her to doubt that. So in 2004, Bobby Dunbar Jr. consented to undergo a DNA test to resolve the issue. The results showed that Bobby Dunbar Jr. was not related by blood to his cousin, the son of John Alonzo Dunbar, the younger brother of Bobby Dunbar Sr. Since the DNA testing was conclusive, the fate of the real Bobby Dunbar remains unknown. Margaret expressed her opinion that Bobby probably fell into the lake during the fishing trip and was eaten by an alligator. It's Louisiana. That is completely logical. She also reported that the results of her investigation brought joy to Julia Anderson's family. Julia was vindicated in her claims that Bobby was actually her own son, Bruce. And William Walther's family was pleased because now William, who's passed away by this point, has been exonerated of the kidnapping accusation. However, her findings sowed some discord in her own family. According to her, the majority of her grandfather Bobby's children and grandchildren considered themselves to be members of the Dunbar family, as they should. He was raised by the Dunbars. They should consider themselves Dunbar families, and they cherished their existing family relationships. But according to Margaret, they were mad at her for having delved into the matter and for stirring up public interest in the case. They did not really appreciate that. Okay, my opinion here. Margaret did what she thought was right. She answered the question once and for all with the help of Bobby Dunbar Jr., and there is no DNA connection to the Dunbar family. However, Bobby was raised by the Dunbars. Regardless of the missteps of everyone involved, Percy and Leslie thought he was their son. They raised him. They loved him. He obviously grew up and had a wife and children and grandchildren, and he had a good life. Okay? The Dunbars are his family. Blood or not, they are his family. Evidence that he had no control over doesn't change who his family is. And really, now his descendants have more family to love, right? If they can conclusively prove that there's a DNA link to them and Julia Anderson's subsequent children, then yay, more family. I mean, I have a huge family. I put myself in an introverted category of people, but I love my huge family. So, Bobby Dunbar, aka Bruce Anderson, was a boy who was kidnapped twice. Or rather, the boy who disappeared twice. Once into the lake and once out of the custody of his uncle. This is a very interesting story because it started a long time ago, 100 years ago, and it has real time right now implications for an existing group of people. But I have so many questions. I mean, two moms, I feel like it's kind of like the story in the Bible of King Solomon, right? Two women claiming the same child. But I don't get how a 4-year-old in 8 months could be so unrecognizable that neither mother could definitively say it was her child. I'm leaning more toward the fact that when Julia got to Mississippi, police realized they probably made a mistake. So they went out of their way to not lend credit to her assertion that Bobby was Bruce. And maybe that had to do with her unmarried mother, her single parent status. Maybe it had something to do with, oops, we made a mistake. We jumped the gun on this. I don't know. I can't figure out still in all of my research why they even started investigating William in the first place. Because, it's not like he was stopped for a traffic violation or had robbed a bank or something. I couldn't figure out why, other than the fact that he was traveling with a child about the same age as the missing child, but not even in the same state. William was from North Carolina and traveled around for his job. But when he was pointed out to authorities or whatever, he wasn't in Louisiana. He was in Mississippi. So I don't know. I know after the Lindbergh kidnapping that people got a little bit anxious and crazy about, for good reason. It really changed how you trusted your children with other people, I suppose. But I don't get it. I don't get why William was a suspect in the first place, other than that he was traveling with a child. I don't understand how two women could not positively identify their child unless somebody was afraid they'd messed up and was tilting the scales one way or the other. I don't get it. But I feel so bad for the Dunbar family. I feel so bad for Julia Anderson. It just seems like everybody involved in the disappearance of the children had no recourse. The Dunbars thought that they had found their child and Julia lost hers. So this is a picture of the Dunbar family before Bobby's disappearance. And I have a picture of Julia and Bruce before Bruce's trip with his uncle William. I also have a picture of William. So, yeah, interesting story with long-term real life implications here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this story. I have a couple of other videos here I think you might like as well. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me what you think is the most likely reason for the confusion. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and have a really fabulous day.